Traditionally on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, for the spot that is reserved for a sermon, it was the rabbinic intern who gave the sermon on second day Rosh Hashanah. So then when you promote the rabbinic intern and they're giving sermons here, we don't have anyone to give the sermon on second day Rosh Hashanah. So what we're going to do is we did this one year before, that as we're talking and creating our sermons and trying to figure out what it is we want to say this year, there are things that don't make it into the sermons, but that we've really been thinking about a lot. And of course, given the year that we've just come through, we've been talking a lot about brokenness, how our tradition holds the notion of brokenness, how we hold that as a people, how we've held it through our history, and how time and again we come through brokenness and come together and somehow figure it out, because we're still here 3,000 years later. So we decided to talk a little bit about this idea of brokenness and where it shows up in our tradition.
So, of course, one of the first things that we think about, especially after standing in front of the ark, is the notion of our tablets and the story that comes from our sacred text, right? That Moses goes up and helps to write out the commandments on these tablets, and of course comes down and sees that the people have panicked. Moses was gone for a while. Moses was gone for 40 days, a number that according to our text is really supposed to just imply too long, right? 40 days is too long. It's over a month. The cycle of the moon has gone all the way through. The people think at this point, Moses is not coming back. So they turn to Aaron, they ask, what should we do? And they end up with the golden calf. Moses sees the golden calf, and even though God also is enraged, it's Moses that shatters the tablets. And what happens?
Moses shatters the agreement, the covenant between God and the people of Israel, because the people of Israel has already broken the deal. He hasn't even come, the ink's not even dry on the covenant, on the documents, and they've already abrogated the deal. So Moshe he tears up the contract because they've already stepped out of the law that they, of course, haven't received yet. That's a bit of a problem. And so Moshe goes back up the mountain, and God says, okay, I gave you the last set. I carved the last set. You carve the next set. After Moshe asks for forgiveness for the people, God forgives the people, has Moshe bring another set of tablets, and it is those tablets, the second tablets, that remained intact. That is the covenant that remains intact for 3,000 years, not the first one. Because we all know it's not until the person that you're making that commitment to breaks your heart and disappoints you and hurts you deeply, it's not till after that that you can have a real relationship that's really going to last. Gray agrees.
We might think from there that, of course, once you have these new tablets, you don't need the old ones. You don't need the ones that you've shattered. You don't need the ones that you have put this painful situation with. And yet our tradition teaches that in the tabernacle, not only did we have the commandments that were re-chiseled or drawn or written or however we want to think of it, but the broken tablets as well. What does it mean to be a tradition that from the very beginning of our story kept the reminder of a episode of brokenness, of something that should cause embarrassment? Instead, our tradition says, yes, and you'll keep those, and you'll bring those with you, and you won't forget that this moment happened because we'll keep the reminder. And what's so interesting is that idea of keeping the brokenness, the shattered, the shards, that it goes through our tradition. Think of even the most joyful days in our tradition. On the day of a wedding, we smash the glass. Now, maybe part of it's just industry, but since then it's grown. People put it into a menorah, into a kiddush cup. Ours is in a mezuzah. People save the glass that they smash. They save this symbol that is supposed to be a reminder of brokenness inside of that celebratory moment. And so our tradition even goes as far as to say there are many reasons for smashing the glass, and there are some that have to do with the brokenness, the temple being destroyed, there being brokenness in this world, and there's other interpretations as well.
I love that our tradition is a both-and tradition. That at the moment of one of our moments of greatest joy, when we are joining together with somebody who's agreed to love us anyway, and that we are making this commitment to one another, this incredibly holy new creation of a new household, a new family, that moment, Dafka, the rabbis have us remind ourselves of the brokenness of the world, that they have us actually break something because they know that that's how we stay resilient as a people, is to never deny the pain, to never deny that all families have their trauma, all relationships have their challenges, all of us are flawed. And I love that at that moment of creating something so beautiful, they also ask us to stay deeply in touch with our own loneliness, our own brokenness, and to remember, it's one of the interpretations I use, at that moment, how many people in this world don't have somebody to be with who loves them? So many people in this world are desperately lonely, and so many people in this world do love somebody that the world doesn't allow them to be with.
This tradition is relationship. And one of the ways that we also see that is there is a deep trust that the crafting of the tradition showed for all of us to continue with. To be able to take a moment that should be joy and to say, I trust you, that you will be able to hold the complexity of this moment. I also share when smashing the glass, there's a couple people here who have done their wedding, so if you've heard this, I'm sorry, I do share it. But that it's not just about breaking in the side of thinking about the negative, but also about taking the visceral act of breaking and knowing that it's related to this idea of brokenness and pain in the world, and seeing it as another symbol altogether. That when you choose to break something like glass, there's a permanence to that action. And that means through life there will be reminders of brokenness, but you also get to choose what you do with that. What you do with those wake-up calls, what you do with those moments, that shattering, that pop, that mazel tov, whatever it might be. Today we hear the blast of the shofar. It's not all one sound. In fact, when we break it up into sounds, one of the calls is the root of brokenness. Shavarim, the root of the word, shaver, to break. What does it mean to even have brokenness be part of our call to action at the beginning of our year?
Shavar, break. Hebrew is this gorgeous language. Shavar, break, is kal. That's the form of the verb. But Hebrew has this wonderful other binyan called piel. It's another form of verbs. You take the shoresh, the three-letter root, and you change how you say it, and it intensifies the verb. So shavar is break or broke, and shiber in piel is shatter. So you take those same letters and say them a little differently, and you get an intensified meaning, shiber, shivarim, this broken sound of the shofar. The rabbis craft it in such a way that we begin with tekiah, then we have shivarim, we have this broken sound, but we always end with tekiah. So those broken sounds that the rabbis give us in the middle, shivarim and teruah, they're supposed to mimic crying, weeping, because we want to be better, we want to be different, we want to be able to do it differently, to be people who can help repair this world that is so terribly, terribly broken and so glorious and magnificent. And so they give us tekiah, then they break up the calls into these broken, sobbing sounds and come back to tekiah. And tekiah was, of course, what was blown. The sound of shofar is what was blown when the Israelites had to rally for an emergency. So if someone was attacking, the shofar was the call to get everybody to their battle stations, and it was also the sound that had the Israelites know it was time to move. It was time to pack up camp and go. So this call, as Rabbi Sher said, this call to action, this call to being different, starts whole, gets broken up into sobbing and wailing, and comes back to wholeness with tekiah. And then, of course, the rabbis have those blasts completed with tekiah gedolah, that we should live to hear the sounding of the shofar that tells us the messianic age has arrived because we human beings have finally figured out how to live together in peace.
The trust, intentionality, purpose behind our tradition. But some of that brokenness may not be intentional, but still be a byproduct of the beauty of the creation altogether. Right? The Kabbalist views this idea of tzimtzum, that God had to contract God's self to make the space for the world to exist. And in that process, the holy vessels that would contain the divine light, that would contain all the potential and beauty of this world, they shattered. Now we use that notion of the shattering to explain a really beautiful piece of our tradition. A shard of the divine is in each of our souls. At the end of life, it is that part of our soul that returns to God. It is interaction with different people when something just works, that we'd feel something beautiful in that relationship when we know God is present. But all of that comes from something that can't be explained, from some accident or mystery that God had an intentional action. But the action that ends up really making a difference in our world is unexplained. It also tells us that if you want to be part of creating something beautiful, messy and broken moments are going to happen. And if you can't lean into those moments, if you're not willing to embrace that messiness, to be okay with stepping through some of that brokenness, you are going to leave the potential and beauty of what can be created behind. It is deeply a part of our story. It's a fundamental aspect to our tradition. We have an active role in its repair, but it's present. And if you want to create something beautiful, you have to embrace that brokenness.
So this teaching of the Kabbalists, that this is how creation happens, divine light withdraws so the universe has a place to exist, then God's light goes back into those vessels, they shatter. We don't know, like we said, we don't know why. This cosmic accident. What I love about this teaching is that there would be no material world without that breakage. There wouldn't be this bima. There wouldn't be the floor. There wouldn't be the ceiling without this breakage that happens. That's how everything is here. And as Daniel said, that means there's a spark. Nitzatzot. There are sparks of the divine light in every single material part of the shattered vessels that we know as the material world. Judaism preceded and did not buy the Greek split between the mental and the spiritual and the physical. Judaism never bought it. We did in the West. We still have this dichotomy between, right, the perfect is the ideal, is the idea, and everything that's here is flawed somehow. These are the Neoplatonists, the Neo-Aristotelians. Judaism never bought it. Within every single material thing in this world, every part, even of this broken, busted world, there is a spark of the divine. And we can liberate that spark. Think about it. If we liberate the spark, if it's a spark of the divine and we liberate that spark, we are actually repairing God. Chutzpah. That the rabbis believe we as human beings, how we interact with each other and with the world, that repairs the divine. Tikkun olam comes from this Kabbalistic teaching. It's not about social action. It's not about social justice. It's about repairing the world, and in doing that, repairing the divine. What an incredible privilege, and what an awesome responsibility. May we figure out this high holiday season what it means for us day after day, encounter after encounter, action after small action after big action, to do the work, the sacred work of repair that only we can do. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.